Greetings, my fellow tinkerers, tailors, soldiers, and activists, and a very warm welcome to you all. So, war, eh? Today I have a military issue pocket watch from World War II, made by one of the Dirty Dozen, Jaeger-LeCoultre. Oh wow, look at that big fat screw. Solid. Yeah, I know this is a voiceover, but I still have to act a little bit surprised. Many of you who collect World War II watches will be familiar with the term Dirty Dozen. During World War II, the British military needed a whole load of wristwatches and pronto, so they commissioned 12 brands to produce as many as they could, and these wristwatches had to adhere to a list of specifications, black dials with white Arabic numerals being some of the spec, as this combination was found to be the easiest and quickest to read in various situations and conditions. But although the British watchmakers pioneered some of the first ever accurate timekeeping devices by the likes of John Harrison and George Graham 2 centuries prior to World War II, there were hardly any British companies left who could fulfill the request of the British military during World War II, and the ones who could were asked to concentrate on producing stuff for the war effort. So conveniently neutral Switzerland came to the rescue, and 12 Swiss companies took on the challenge, and JLC was amongst those 12. Oh look, the dial is screwed in directly to the movement. That's crazy. And later on, collectors decided to call them the Dirty Dozen, probably after the 1960s movie with said name. So you're wondering why was the military still issuing pocket watches in World War II, when wristwatches were well established by then and more practical? Well, I suppose the military may have still been weaning itself off older, more reliable technology, such as the pocket watch. Wristwatches had become a thing by World War II, but by no means a refined, finely tuned piece of equipment as it is today. It struggled with accuracy whilst flying around the gaff on flailing wrists in various positions. The pocket watch was seen to be more superior in terms of accuracy, as usually it would just be sitting in one position in a Burberry trench coat pocket. Hence why we have this GSTP pocket watch from that era serving alongside the likes of the Dirty Dozen wristwatches. Collectors are mad for these Dirty Dozen wristwatches, and if you've managed to collect the whole set, then you've hit the jackpot. And I've seen collections fetch upwards of £30,000. Me personally, when I handle a piece like this, I can admire the beauty of the movement, but handling any military watch gives me an eerie feeling, in a sad and sorrowful way. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward, all in the valley of death, rode the 600. So the feeling I got when I first read that poem as a child is the feeling I get when I work on one of these watches. I may have been naive as a child, but I thought there had to be another way. Did those 600 young boys deserve this fate? Who ordered them to do such a thing knowing the outcome? Let me know in the comments what you think this poem means. I imagine some well-fed, privileged tyrant sitting in his lofty castle ordering someone else's sons to go on a one-way mission as cannon fodder with the promise that they will be honoured, remembered. Their lives are for the greater good, for king and country, and all that other bollocks people in power say to the poor masses to convince them to do their dirty work. But as I said, I must have been naive. Or was I? You see, the poem was based on real events during the Battle of Balaclava during the Crimean War in 1854, and good old Queen Vicky ruled for most of that century, and her grandchildren later ruled England, Germany, Russia, Greece, Spain, Norway, Sweden and Romania, directly or through marriage, and who fought each other during these wars. So it was basically a family feud, cousins fighting cousins, but everybody else had to pay the price. There is always another way. It's like a big brass biscuit. A lot of you were concerned by my silent protest on the last restoration video, and many of you were very understanding and sent me the most kindest of wishes and messages, and I felt like I was not alone. But some of you were really missing my voice and commentary, supposedly. So, just as the father who caught his young son smoking, what did he do? Instead of punishing him, his father bought him a whole packet to smoke in one go. By the time that boy was finished, he never touched a smoke again in his whole life. So basically I'll be talking for England on this episode. So the strip down was quite straightforward and easy, and now I'm just pegging out the jewels and doing some manual cleaning. I assume some natural oils would have been used on an old pocket watch, which congeal up over time, hence why your watch becomes less accurate or even stops altogether. So a bit of manual cleaning helps remove that stubborn congealed oil. Modern synthetic oils, rather than congealing up, are designed to evaporate over time, also causing your watch to stop performing accurately, so a service is recommended every 3 to 5 years. Now these parts are so big, I don't think I can fit everything in at once. There is a lot of bruising and plate loss to some of these parts, so this watch may have previously danced with some moisture as the trench is filled up with rainwater. Dude, it's not gonna fit. If you don't have a fancy cleaning machine like mine, then I did cover how to clean your parts using alternative methods in this video, which you can watch up here. You will need some non-water based cleaning solutions and an ultrasonic cleaner, which you can pick up for around £50 for a low budget one. And if you don't have an ultrasonic cleaner yet, then have a go cleaning it all by hand with some thyme and elbow grease. So this is a nickel plated case over brass and has some battle scars, and it would be sacrilege to restore it. So I'm just going to give it a wash and dry. Now I initially thought this was a piece of plexiglass, and I noticed a rash on the surface, so I thought I'd give it a little rub with some polywatch. But after rubbing it with some vigour, I realised it wasn't snapped in, but rather a loosely glued in piece of glass. The rash on the surface may have been some smudged adhesive that's dried, so I'll try rubbing it with some solvent remover. I don't want to order another snap-on plexi because it's a really nice piece of glass, so I want to reuse it. So I'm going to glue it in correctly with some UV curing glue, which is quite expensive, but you can also use some cheaper alternatives such as glass cement, which takes a little longer to dry but a lot more friendlier on the wallet. So you can see how the adhesive has been incorrectly applied and is all over the inner bezel when it should only be applied to that little ledge. So it's imperative that all the old adhesive and loose bits are removed prior to applying any fresh adhesive. So after manually cleaning it, you can run this through your ultrasonic if you have one, and I just use an oil oiler to apply the adhesive and make sure that it stays on that small ledge. Also have some solvent cleaner to hand just in case you make a mess. And yes, my UV curer is just the accountant's nail lamp. So the cleaning cycle on my Elma RM90 is 1 cycle of LNR cleaning solution and 2 jars with LNR rinse aid. It also dries the parts after a wash. So now that all the parts are nice and clean, let's go over all the oiling that you'll need to get a movement like this up and running. You will need about 4 or 5 oils, and these can get very expensive. So make sure you have the accountant's approval before you start adding these to your basket. She will probably suggest you use a bit of cooking oil. Just smile and nod and walk backwards out into the shed before you let out your scream. So this is the top capsule for the balance wheel. I'll give it a further clean and oil it with Moebius 9010. And 9010 is a must in your oil collection. Now if you're using a new mainspring, then there's no need to oil it, but an old mainspring, you can rub it down with some Moebius 8200. Apply it thinly with a bit of grease-proof baking paper or tissue paper. The mainspring barrel looks a bit rough, so we can add a little bit of HP 1300 or D5. HP 1300 is a modern synthetic alternative to D5, and these are considered as thick oils. So every time I say D5, it also means HP 1300. For your reference, I apply a bit of D5 on the lid hole for the arbor, or you can do it after you've installed it. You can see the barrel lid has suffered some plate loss during cleaning, which is just a bit of bad luck really. And the same here, a bit of D5 on the main plate where the mainspring arbor will sit. I then pop on the ratchet wheel and then assemble the crown wheel and click complete beneath the barrel bridge. I'll put a little bit of D5 on the tip of the click. And there isn't a post or anything for the crown wheel, so I'll put a bit of D5 where the crown wheel seat will be brushing on the main plate, and I'll put a bit on top of the seat. I can now install the crown wheel and dab a little D5 where the crown wheel core will be rubbing upon rotation. And again, we can see some old battle wounds, most likely from moisture. And before we get the barrel bridge on, we can oil the top of the setting lever screw with some D5 and a little bit on the hole. The setting lever screw is one of those parts that you can easily forget to install, and then when you're doing the keyless, you realize and say, because now you have to go back and start undoing the bridges to get it back in. I continue to assemble the train, and we start off with the escape wheel and the third wheel. The fourth wheel in this instance has an extended pivot which carries the subsidiary seconds hand on the dial side. The second wheel, which is the center wheel, which also has an extended post for the cannon pinion, so we can put a bit of D5 in the hole or on the base of the post. In goes the bridge, and we'll give it a little test to make sure everything is running freely. And that all looks good, doesn't it? Yeah. And my apologies for the sudden groggy voice. I went on a little road trip yesterday with the family and picked up an allergy, and now my nose has turned into a waterfall. Once the screws are in, we can now start doing some oiling on the train. So we want a bit of D5 on the center wheel and some D5 on the third wheel. Some Moebius 9010 on the fourth wheel and some 9010 on the escape wheel. So onto the dial side, and we continue with the oiling, and it's the same for each wheel as on the opposite side. Now we need some grease for the really heavy duty parts, so I'll use some Moebius 9501 on the teeth of the winding pinion. These teeth will mesh with the sliding pinion or clutch, so you can put the grease on one surface or on each surface. I also put a bit on the wall where the sliding pinion will be rubbing against from time to time. Now we'll do the stem. This little groove is where the setting lever action will sit, which will operate the clutch and also hold in the stem from pulling out. So we can use the 9501 grease here and also on the rest of the stem, some on the four sides of the square and on the tip. The setting lever can now go in, and we can tighten up the screw from the other side. We'll put a bit of D5 here on the sliding pinion, as the yoke will be sitting here, and a bit of D5 on the post for the yoke. So by now you might be hearing D5 quite a bit, and that's another oil that you will need in your collection, or the alternative HP 1300. So we'll get some D5 on the setting wheel and the intermediate wheel. And some D5 on the post for the minute wheel. Before we get the keyless cover on, we can install the yoke spring. You can see the points where there is rubbing during operation, so these are the points where you can put a bit of grease. Don't worry about making a mess here, as you can clean it up with some Radico. Now that feels nice. Now we can get the keyless cover on, which also incorporates the setting lever spring. Sounds like you're doing something really important, like writing your PhD thesis, but you're not, are you? Just bloody playing Roblox. Are you looking forward to going back to school?
Kinda.
Here, if you are unable to move the spring out of the way to grease the post, just operate the spring and you'll be able to see where the contact points are and just grease the points on the spring. This will spread it around where it needs to be once you operate the setting lever, and then you can clean away the mess. Ooh, that all feels like butter now. We can now put the cannon pinion on, and a bit of D5 will go down well here. Now let's go back on the other side and install the balance, and we start with the pallet fork. We don't oil the pallet fork pivots, but we need to oil the pallet stone and then spread it around the escape wheel teeth. Now that's a handsome looking pallet fork bridge if there ever was one. So we'll give it a little power before we tighten it all up so that we can be sure it's in correctly. I can never capture this on video clearly as I need to use my eye loop, but we apply a small amount of 941 on the entry stone and then flick it a few times to get it onto the escape wheel teeth, and then repeat the process a couple of times. And we can install the balance wheel. Boom, everything is looking alright so far. What's the matter with you? Is that some fake kind of whinging? Fake whinging. Don't touch my stuff. Such a drama queen. We've already oiled the cap jewel on the dial side, so now we can oil the cap jewel on the balance cock. You can see a bit of residue on the cap jewel, so I dip it in a bit of rinse aid and give it a manual clean. And that looks squeaky. Bit of 90-10 and bosh, back in it goes. I don't know what the lift angle is for this movement, but at 52 the amplitude has improved a lot. The rate can easily be adjusted using the regulator, but the beat error is still out and I need to adjust the hairspring via the collet. You can see there's a little slit, so I turn it one way and see if that improves it. If it makes it worse, I know then to go the other way. So that was the correct way, so I'll try a little bit more, and that's looking a lot better. I'll let everything settle for a few days and retune it a bit more, but for now, let's get this video finished. Now this dial has some aging, and it's most likely the radiation from the radium that would have been on this dial. But I think this current loom is a modern, safer version, and someone has just tinted it to look old as the application looks like a dog's dinner up close. I'm just curious to see if these blue marks will come off, so I give it a gentle wet rub, but it wasn't happening, so I back off. Bit of D5 on the cannon pinion and then slap on the hour wheel and the washer, and we can put on the dial. Be careful not to let your screwdriver slip on these dial screws, otherwise it will leave a very bitter taste. So whoever reloomed the dial also probably removed the loom on the hands, as most often these hands would have some radium on them. You've seen me reloom hands loads of times, so I'll just leave everything as it is on this one. I'll just give them a little wipe, and that's all there is to say about that really. And that's probably all the oiling information you'll need for almost most pocket watches, manual wind wristwatches, and will also help you with part of your automatics. This one is ready to serve for many more decades, but it's glad that it will never be involved in another battle, unless a fight breaks out at the wedding reception while it's sitting in the groom's waistcoat pocket. So thank you all for sitting with me on this one, and I hope you find the oiling advice useful. Oh, and do let me know if the 4K footage looks good on the devices you're watching it on. It was an absolute mission filming and editing all this in 4K. All my cameras seem to have a weird crap on the 4K setting, and the computing power and data handling power needed was testing at times, but I think I've got the hang of it now. So if you would like more 4K content, let me know in the comments, but please do feel free to say no. Thank you all for watching, and thanks to every single one of you who have been so supportive of me recently. Look after yourselves, friends, and look after each other. Peace, love, and blessings to you all. And let's pray for the freedom of the oppressed. And let's pray for the tyrants and evildoers of this world to be brought to justice. All I have is prayer. So when I pray for justice, I pray for justice even if it's against myself, lest I be amongst the wrongdoers without realizing that I am one. Because you see, if everyone thinks that they are the good guy, how is it that we have so many bad guys? Let's ponder upon that. Ta-ra!
Are we the baddies?
If I must die, you must live. To tell my story, to sell my things, to buy a piece of cloth and some strings, make it white with a long tail, so that a child somewhere in Gaza, while looking heaven in the eye, awaiting his dad who left in a blaze, and bid no one farewell, not even to his flesh, not even to himself, sees the kite, my kite you made, flying up above, and thinks for a moment an angel is there, bringing back love. If I must die, let it bring hope, let it be a tale.